Welcome to our listeners to this Fee Compass Jam Session podcast, which is being recorded live from Fee Campus 2024 on the theme Ask Me Anything with DG REGIO and EIB experts. My name is Desmond Gardner and I will be your moderator today. Our speakers have bravely agreed to try to respond to any question raised this afternoon from our audience. And we also have some questions which were raised by participants when they registered for the event. So let me introduce our speakers today. From DG REGIO's Financial Instruments and Relations with International Financial Institutions Unit, I'm pleased to welcome the Head of Unit, Jonathan Denness, and Deputy Head of Unit, Oana Dordain. And from the EIB's Financial Intermediaries Advisory Division, we have the Head of Division and Head of the Climate and Urban Unit, Frank Lee and Emily Smith. And finally, we have around about 70 or so people here in the audience today. Welcome, everybody. So we will try to structure this discussion around some topics initially. And we have some questions that were raised in advance, and then we'll invite follow-on questions from the audience on the same topic. If you have a question, please raise your hand and say who you are beforehand. So I would like to invite to ask the first question, Angelina Todorova, the former Deputy Minister of Regional Development and Public Works in Bulgaria. Angelina.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for this. My question is difficult, I think, because in our universe, the grants and subsidies will continue to cohabitate with financial instruments. So my question is, how can we make combinations of grants and financial instruments easier, more flexible, and more attractive in the new programming period, post-27? Thank you.
Thank you, Angelina. Oana.
Thank you very much for the question. Indeed, I think we managed to make a big step to make them flexible already now, as we heard earlier today. And I think we can do much more. Because imagine a world where you'll not have rules so much for grants and financial instruments, but we'll be focusing on results. So if the direction of the cohesion policy will be to focus on results, we'll concentrate on what we want to achieve and not how. So in 1420, we have these rules for grants in order to avoid abuses for grants which are used under financial instruments. So that's why we have these limits and this justification and so on. If in the future we will concentrate on what we want to achieve, and for example, we say we want to achieve a leverage of 4 for energy efficiency investments, I think it will be difficult for national authorities to do this without a financial instrument. And for sure, we will not need any more these rules, which are quite cumbersome for specific sectors and situations. So let's see how things will evolve, but it's a bit our thinking for the moment.
Thank you. And Frank, maybe turning to you, how do you think combinations with grants and FIs can be made easier?
First of all, I was impressed by Oana's answer there. Actually, it's quite futuristic, I would say, and hopefully that is the direction we're going to take. That would be great. So, I mean, obviously we've developed a lot of material through Fee Compass on this particular topic, which to some extent we knew that this was going to be a game changer, but we also knew that the devil was going to be in the detail, as I always say. So we were obviously working on this. This is a work in progress, and we'll obviously find more and more challenges as we go through implementation. But I think there is a willingness to make this work, and therefore solutions will definitely be found. Some of these problems are already out there, and we know about them. They were discussed already today, earlier in the sessions. State aid is obviously one of them. But I think probably the most important thing to do for the next period is to make sure that these fundamental decisions are made up front about what do we use grants for, and what do we use financial instruments for, and what do we potentially use combinations for? Because I think the biggest threat to the success of the combination is the instrument that comes along with 100% grant. And I guess we also talked about that today. So I think we need to make sure that those rules are set out up front, that all the funds play by the same rule book, and then I think the other stuff will flow.
Oh, thank you, Frank. Yeah, very interesting. Maybe Emily, we had a related question also from a participant during registration about how we can provide more flexible financing. Are grants the key to this?
I think building on what Frank and Oana have said, combination financial instruments definitely are the way to provide that flexibility. I think especially given the new CPR and the ability to set the maximum level of grant at the overall financial instrument. I think that gives managing authorities the potential to have really relatively high levels of grant where there are deep market failures and to adjust the grant products to best respond to the market. So I think combinations for me are definitely the way to go.
And John, your thoughts on flexibility and grants and financial instruments?
I'd like to challenge the question a little bit, and I'd like to turn it into not how can we, but should we. Flexibility comes at a cost. And flexibility comes at the cost of complication. And the rules become more complicated, the more flexible they are. It's not in every case, just 99.9% of the cases. So if you want flexibility, it's likely to be, paradoxically, it may well be more difficult to implement because the rules will be more complicated. So we are often told, Commission, you should simplify the rules. That's fine. So we can simplify the rules, and that creates rigidity. So flexibility for me is something that, before you ask this question, think very carefully about whether you really do want flexibility. But I agree with Emily, combinations of grants and financial instruments can be a part of this flexibility. We've seen this afternoon people talking about energy poverty. The combination of grants and financial instruments enables you to tackle energy poverty really effectively. So flexibility can be provided through grants, but again, be very careful about how you construct it.
Oh, thank you, John. Angelina, maybe I can come back to you. What are your thoughts in terms of the responses from the panel?
Thank you. I agree with what was said by the Commission, that there is already additional, how to say, not flexibility, but freedom for the managing authorities to choose one operation or deal with a combination in two operations. So I hope the direction is right. And what I heard is really, really satisfactory. A little bit futuristic, but then with all the risk management also mentioned at the end. So thank you very much for this. So we are looking forward to continuing to work with combinations.
Thank you. Is there anybody else in the audience who would like to ask a question or make a comment on the issue of combination of grant and financial instruments? Oh, we have a question there at the back. Please, when the microphone arrives, if you could just say your name and where you're from, and then maybe ask your question. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Tomislav. I come from the Croatian Managing Authority for the ESF+. And I have a question regarding the grant part of the combination. It's just my comment on that issue. I think the grant part will be a major issue for the audit authority, maybe a red alarm for them. So I'm not sure how we are going to cope with that, with them, how to influence on the audit authority to change their mind on how to check that part, because they need to follow the procedure for the financial instruments when combining those two operations into one. Maybe your take on that.
Indeed. Oana, we've done a lot recently on audit methodology. Do you want to comment?
Yes. So we started this process 3 years ago, maybe, and for sure it's not ready, and there are still colleagues from audit authorities asking if they can check the invoices for the grant component and so on. So we know that despite all our efforts with our colleagues here, it's not done yet. But our thinking for the near future would be maybe to engage directly with audit authorities and to go to member states to have such seminars as we had here in Luxembourg. In English, I think it will be much more valuable if we manage to go there to speak their language and to preach, I would say, the audit methodology which is clear on this subject. So it should be no confusion or no discussion how the grant should be audited, but we know that mentality changes last, so we should engage, and if you have specific problems in your implementation, you should just let us know and try to engage with us and with the audit authorities. We are there to help.
John?
Yes, and a very good question, and two things. Firstly, be very, very strong with the audit authority. The new rules are very simple. You use the financial instrument rules. You audit according to the financial instrument rules, not the grant rules. You don't have to mix them up. And secondly, if despite being strong, you have problems, we're on your side, and we can come and help.
Thank you. Anybody else got any questions or comments, or should we move on? Yes, please.
Thank you. Managing Authority Slovenia, Taja Florjancic. So we're thinking of setting up a combination of a loan and a grant, and we are wondering whether we need to decide on the amount of the help at the point when we approve the application for the loan and the grant part, because we will, of course, need to respect the state aid rules. So the question is, do we need to check afterwards what was the actual expenditure of the company, let's say, that received the help, the support?
Oana, I think.
We were discussing earlier in the seminar to be simple, to do things simply. So I think to have a discretion for the fund manager, financial intermediaries to decide for each case how much grant they should give, it's a big responsibility for them, and I'm not sure they will take it on board. So I think you should fix some rules from the beginning in the financial instrument setup, how much in line with the stated rules. And this will not change after from state aid perspective. It cannot be controlled based on invoices or whatever by the audit authority. So the percentage as such is set up when the loan is given. The controls are done at that moment that the investment is eligible, the final recipient is eligible. But to modulate the amount of grant on conditions which are not clear for fund managers, you should be very careful, because it can give subject to interpretation and to audit discussions. The easiest from our perspective would be that you say for certain types of final recipients, you have 10%, 15%, whatever it is needed, and you go with this, with a standardized approach for everybody. And of course, you can modulate it based on the targeted final recipients, but the rule should be really not subjective and objective and clear for everybody, because if not, it will be very difficult to implement. And the controls, as I said, are done the moment when the loan is given, and it should stop there. Yeah.
And if I may add, and I fully agree with what Oana said, and also establishing all of the rules up front, and also doing this in the ex-ante assessment, for example, I think is also useful in terms of even getting the state aid clearances sorted out up front as well, so that you're not looking at this transaction by transaction or operation by operation. You're looking at this in its holistic form. You're saying, this is the target, this is the percentage of grant, and you're getting this all cleared up front, so it becomes much easier and much clearer for the intermediaries and the final beneficiaries to then go ahead and implement.
Thank you. Hopefully that goes some way to answer the question. Okay, so let's move on now to the topic of smart and sustainable growth. The next question is from Martina Bartakova. Martina is a consultant at EY in the Czech Republic. Martina, your question.
Hello, nice evening. My question is a little bit maybe simpler, but as a beginning in a topic of financial instruments. And also, like, to connect with today's topic, it was mostly about the green finance, or as the ESG mostly was took from the point of the environment, environmental problems. And I'm interested, what are the future plans about the financial instruments in the sector of the smart growth and sustainable finance overall, as there are also other parts as only the environment part.
Thank you. Emily, can I go to you?
Yep, I'll give it a go. Thank you. So you heard earlier that we're very much doubling down on our efforts in relation to energy efficiency and renewable energy. But as you rightly say, it's a very broad investment area. So in terms of other topics, so on Thursday, on day 3 of the event, you'll hear about our new equity financial instrument model, which I think has huge relevance for the sector that you mentioned. We're also actively, as EIB, exploring housing as one of our key priorities, and as we move forward, it's one of the areas that we want to try and explore the use of financial instruments. We also have the existing new European Bauhaus urban development model available on the Fee Compass website. So I think between the energy efficiency model that you've heard about this afternoon even, the equity model that you'll hear about on Thursday, and the existing new European Bauhaus model, I think you hopefully will have some good inspiration there for those sectors.
Thank you, Emily. And maybe I can add to people who are listening to the podcast who didn't make it to Fee Campus, all these materials will be available on the event page on our website, so there'll be lots of rich information there. John, would you like to comment about the future of smart and sustainable growth?
Emily has said nearly all of it, which is terrific. In terms of looking for inspiration elsewhere, we had a terrific workshop in Athens earlier in the year, which is on the FA Campus website, where we had a very rich discussion with final recipients of equity investments and very innovative companies and very, very successful ones, particularly in Greece. And then you talk about the future, and earlier I was saying we want to focus on the future. As Oana said earlier, we're looking at repaying by achievements of targets rather than through actual expenditure. And I think we're going to use every way we can to make sure that both SME and energy efficiency, and following the session we've just had, renewables as well, there has to be a big presumption that you use financial instruments for those sectors. But if I may, under the control of you, Des, what would be your wish list for the future for us?
Yeah, perhaps people can raise their hands. I think Martina, maybe you go first, and then if anybody else wants to come back with some feedback, that would be great too. Martina.
I would say maybe from the point of view as someone young living in the Central Europe, to try to connect cities inside, maybe with some project, not only connecting or trying to improve the energy or the part of the investment into energy sector and this industrialistic, but maybe more into the cities. Think how to connect the cities, not only as it is mostly in most of the cities divided into the old generation living with some condition which is used to, and the young that want to change it. So maybe try to look at this way, and also from the sustainable point of view, my way. So I'm trying to live that way that it is even maybe my child and future generation where have some good place to live. So not only looking at the industrialistic, but more into the city and this also maybe social economy.
Thank you, Martina. Would anybody else like to ask a question or make a comment on this topic?
Just to pick up on that topic, I mean, energy efficiency in housing, for example, is a very interesting dimension. I mean, this is not just an environmental discussion, right? And if you look at the examples that we have of who is using it, particularly in Central and Eastern Europe, I mean, housing, we talk about apartment blocks. In apartment blocks, you have rich people, you have poor people, you have all sorts of social dimension, let's say, old people, young people. What we've experienced is that the energy efficiency renovation project is not just about energy savings, right? It's also quality of life. It's giving people opportunities to, for example, work at home. It can be about job creation in terms of, how many jobs are created doing these kinds of projects. The value, the euro spent versus the number of jobs created for energy efficiency is one of the highest. Certainly compared to renewables, for example. It's a much more efficient form of investment that you should undertake. And last but not least is the social dimension, and John mentioned it already. the energy poverty people living in these apartments, energy efficiency obviously helps them a lot. So, there's all sorts of dimensions to a particular project like energy efficiency. And I guess it's our job collectively to raise the awareness with citizens that these are all the multiple benefits that you get from doing this. And this is not about whether you're using financial instruments or grants. I mean, this is just, this is good stuff that we all should be doing, right?
Indeed. Okay, thank you. John, you'd like to comment?
And one more thing. I heard a little bit of a plea for good housing in your remarks. I think you will see, once the new commission is in place, and once we have the new regime, I think you will start seeing things on housing, because I think there's a general recognition that housing is a big problem in many parts of Europe. It's a different problem in each city. It's a different problem in each member state. But yes, we are doing some thinking about what we could do about that.
Thank you, John. Alexei, did you want to ask a question?
Thank you. My name is Alexei Skaneyevs from Altum, National Promotional Institution of Latvia. It resonates with me what Frank just said, but I just wanted to ask Frank whether you would agree that it's quite difficult to address each and individual apartment owner under combined financial instrument, because, at least in our case, we are supporting, or we are making contract with one single entity, legal person, which is representing apartment owners. So I imagine it's quite difficult to approve various capital rebates for number 1 apartment, number 2, or number 3 apartment.
Yes, in the sense of what you highlighted. If you're having one borrower, that is, of course, more difficult to do. But that's not the only model that is being used, obviously. And there are other ways, I guess, in which you can combine the grant, perhaps in a less direct way, of course, as well. We don't have enough time today, I think, to go into some of the details, but I think it depends on the situation, is my short answer. I think your situation, as you say, may be more difficult to do it when you're having one loan, one counterpart who is representing all these different apartment owners in their different forms, let's say. But there are other models that are out there that are doing things a bit differently, where you can have this differentiation, let's say.
Thank you, Frank, and thank you for the question as well. Okay, so let's move on to the third topic, which is a topic I know is on the agenda of many people dealing with financial instruments. It's from Mark Batto, who's from the Ministry for Public Administration and Territorial Development in Hungary. Mark?
Yes, thank you, Desmond. This is the coordinating body of the cohesion policy funds I'm working for, and my question relates to the horizontal selection criteria, which get even more importance in cohesion policy, mainly in the 21-27 period, rightly. But my question is how to involve this in the implementation of financial instruments, where the implementing bodies are not the managing authorities, but the financial institutions. So it would be really nice to hear some examples, some advice, how to involve these horizontal criteria, like the NSH principle, like climate proofing, like the Charter of Fundamental Rights and smart specialization strategies. So all of these very important issues in the context of the financial instruments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Oana?
Yes. Thank you very much for the question. We are in a situation where we have financial instruments under cohesion policy. So whatever is applicable to cohesion policy will apply to financial instruments. The problem in 21-27 was that we approved our CPR when the DNSH was put on the table under RRF. So in reality, we had rules under cohesion policy which are not aligned with the rules which came after, and we tried at the last minute to align them somehow, so there is a lot of unclarity. We try to solve this problem and we try to go out with some rules. I can tell you that we are discussing a lot in the Commission how we should align now, not only for cohesion policy, but how to align the DNSH principle for all funds, for RRF, for all funds. So I can understand it's not easy for you to deal with things for which even in the Commission we are still discussing. Coming back now to financial instruments. So we have the chance, I would say, that financial instruments are, we consider the selection of the financial instrument operation at the highest level, so which can be done through the ex-ante assessment. So it means that for DNSH, there are some of these horizontal principles which are applicable at the level of the financial instrument, at the level of the investments, like DNSH or climate proofing. So we said this time around, if there is something in the program which indicates that further assessment should be done, we'll do it at the lower level. If not, we stop at the level of the program. Yes, for climate proofing is different because there is a certain type of investments which has to be taken. After, when we speak about the Charter of Fundamental Rights, I think this is a problem at the level of the member state, and I do not see how this can be applicable to the financial instrument operation as such, because it should be dealt with at the level of the member state. Regarding the smart specialization strategy, this is a question for the managing authority and should be dealt by the managing authority when the financial instrument is set up. If they will have to align with the smart specialization strategy, they will have to set up a financial instrument which by default would be in line with this strategy. Because if not, it is very difficult to ask a bank, a private bank, to assess criteria which are not in their competencies. Yeah? So I think we should put each criteria at its level and to translate down to fund managers, to banks, and to final recipients what can be really in their hands to be assessed. So we'll continue, I think, to have all kinds of these criteria. We hope for the future that we'll have some general understanding of what it is the NSH and how to deal with these issues. But we should also be careful and to adjust these rules to the financial instrument specificities, because not everything can be dealt for financial instruments as they are dealt for grants when the managing authority has the responsibility and decides to whom the funding is given.
Thank you, Oana. And I think we'll hear from Frank in a moment, but it would be good after that, maybe if people could share their experience of dealing with these sorts of topics. I think it would be really helpful. But maybe first, Frank, I'll come to you.
I don't have much to add to what Oana said. I mean, fully agree. DNSH, as Oana said, is something that's came after the CPO was agreed. It's still a moving target. There's already talks now about streamlining, as you say, harmonizing across the funds. But also there's some very interesting discussions about how this can be much more simplified for SMEs in particular. You'll hear about this on day 3, by the way. There's an interesting session coming up where we have DG FISMA colleagues and DG GROW colleagues coming to talk to us, because this is really at the top of their agenda, actually. So, you know, save your questions for them. But I think, as you'll hear, this is not, this is not being ignored. Let's put it that way. So, and I think it's being dealt with, and it's being dealt with, in my opinion, in a very practical way. It's just maybe we'll have to wait for this to be, done, which maybe not suiting you in terms of getting implementation done on the ground. But at least you will be able to see the direction of travel. Maybe give you some reassurance.
Thank you, Frank. So it's good to know it's developing, but yes, in the meantime, we need to get on with implementing financial instruments. Maybe, Mark, I can come back to you first of all. What's your response to that? I mean, do you have any comments? And then if anybody else would like to add something, please do raise your hand.
Yes, thank you for your answers. I fully agree with these directions, and from a theoretic point of view, I'm absolutely in line with this approach, and let's strengthen each other in the application of this, because in the application we have already experienced some concrete problems, but of course we have to distribute this approach and find a really commonly applied approach to these issues. And of course I will go to the third day meeting to get even more information about this. Thank you.
And I guess that information will be available on the website as well for the listeners to the podcast. Did anybody else want to make a comment on this topic? Looking around, does anybody want to comment? No? Okay.
Angelina, maybe?
Oh, Angelina, yes. So in the front row. Thank you.
Very short comment. I think Frank and Emily are being very modest here, because I think the more policy issues are implemented in a financial instrument, the more the need for advisory is very visible. So I think, with all these horizontal issues, with all these additional trackings and earmarkings, I think we shouldn't forget the role of the advisory. The member states need it, the managing authorities, then the holding funds when they exist, the financial intermediaries, of course, the final recipients. So never forget it.
And the Commission needs it as well.
Thank you for the plug, Angelina. And maybe that's a good moment I can mention. We did have a FECUMPA's Knowledge Hub on this topic recently, and we will be publishing something probably just after the summer, which should be of interesting reading for everybody who's trying to deal with this as well. Thank you for your comments. So that concludes our sort of pre-cooked part of the session. So now it's over to you. The session is an Ask Me Anything session, so it is your opportunity to ask the panel anything you would like. So maybe if anybody has a question they would like to raise their hand, we can get a microphone over to you. Gentleman in the middle.
Hello, I'm Ernesto. I'm from Italy, and I'm a little abusive here because I'm an academic, and I've been listening to all the extremely expert managing authorities. Now, I would like to drop a comment, which is about agriculture. Energy efficiency and agriculture have a lot to see each other, but agriculture is highly subsidized, is out of the CPR until the modification. And the issue I see here is that, for example, for Italy, the generous Italy platform now is discontinued. Any suggestion for streamlining life to managing authorities and making them more courageous towards the use of combination of ERDF and the financial instruments, because agriculture is also one of the sectors who has the most difficulties to get financial resources. Thank you.
Thank you, Ernesto. Maybe Frank, I can come to you about that and agriculture.
We're not covering the agricultural financial instruments in FEE Campus this year, but that's not to say that there's not something going on there. The use of financial instruments under the EAFRD is actually growing. It's not clearly at the level that we see in ERDF, but it's also started out relatively late, as it were. We've done a lot of work with DG Agri to actually look at how we can promote more financial instruments. And you obviously talk about energy efficiency, you talk about climate, you talk about the taxonomy, which doesn't yet apply to agriculture. And I don't want to get into that debate about why that is. You can speak to the politicians. However, as EIB, we look at agriculture and we see a number of activities in agriculture which we consider to be green. And we are therefore prioritizing this kind of investment. And we're talking about energy efficiency measures, we're talking about renewables, solar panels, etc. We're talking about adaptation, which is a very important topic when it comes to agriculture. And we are actually, for those of you that may have read publicly available information, our president has made agriculture one of our, as EIB, top 8 priorities, and we are therefore thinking about more products and more financing that we'll be able to do in that sector. And when I talk about EIB, I also talk about the EIF, our sister organization that does guarantees, and they are already doing a lot in this sector. So just to say that this is not being ignored, and I think a lot more could be done. But you are obviously fully aware that this is a relatively political debate. Yeah?
Thank you, Frank, and thank you, Ernesto, for the question. Do we have any other questions? Yes, lady.
Yes, hello everybody. My name is Patrycja Szczygieł. I'm from Pomorski Region, Poland, Managing Authority. And we spoke today a lot about introducing financial instruments into private sector. SMEs, private housing, and more or less they are already familiar with this form of support. But let's imagine you are a mayor of a little local authority in the wooden part of Pomorski region, for example. How would you convince them to use a loan for building a school or energy efficiency in public buildings instead of a grant, because this is the challenge we as a managing authority face every time we speak with these little local authorities and try to convince them to use grant, and not grants but loans or combined instruments.
Yeah, thank you, Patricia. Good question. John, maybe could I ask you to comment on that first?
Yes. I would go into the headmaster's office or the headmistress's office and say, if you make your school more energy efficient, you will save money on your energy bills. Therefore, you will have the money available to repay your loan. If there is, and we discussed this earlier, if there's deeper renovations, that can be done in combination with a grant. Or if there are particular economic circumstances which makes it difficult, that can be done in combination with a grant, so a combination of grant and loan. The other key point you need to convince yourself about is that a loan will be given by a bank, and therefore you are essentially outsourcing a lot of the economic viability testing of the investment to the private sector. And the private sector will try to do things as efficiently as possible, and they'll try to do it at a lower cost as possible. So a loan will be more efficient than a pure grant. But the argument for the head teacher sitting in their office is, you're going to save money, you'll have money available to repay the loan.
Thank you, John. And maybe Emily, I can come to you. I think the question also talked about small local authorities as well.
Yeah, I think, as John said, I'd make the financial instrument product as attractive as possible. I think as part of that, I would offer the headmaster some technical support to help him design his project. And then I would turn off all of those incentives in relation to the grant. So I'd make it as difficult as possible for him to access the grant. So really facilitate the financial instrument and make the grant very, very difficult. If you manage to convince him to take the financial instrument component, you can use your grant for the projects that aren't cost saving and aren't revenue generating. And hopefully that's a better story for the mayor overall.
Thanks. And Frank, do you want to add to that?
I mean, what I would do is sit down with the mayor and understand from the mayor what are all the investments that this mayor has to do. And let's say over the next 3 or 4 or 5 years. And get them to realize that if they want to do all of these investments, they're not going to be able to do it all with grants because there's not enough grants available. Through that process, you then move on to a discussion about, of all these projects you want to do, Mr. Mayor, which ones generate revenue and which ones save costs? And this is coming back to what was already said. And if you have projects like that, knowing that you don't have enough grants to do all of them, maybe look at doing those ones with financial instruments. And if you want a little bit of incentive, do it in a grant combination at least. The mentality should not be, oh, I'm being forced to take a loan, whereas there might be some grants out there that I'm not getting. This should be about, there's only so much grants that can be used. You should obviously get as much grants as you can, but you're not going to be able to do everything you want to do with grants. Most mayors know that. So they should be then thinking, okay, those other projects that I want to do I need grants for all of these projects? No, is probably the answer. And get them to realize for themselves that there's certain economic activities that they can support where there is, as I say, income generation or cost savings. These are obviously the ideal projects for financial instruments.
Thank you, Frank. There's a mayor in a small local authority in Pomorski who's getting some very good advice right now. Maybe, Oana, I'll come back to you. Yeah. Come back for the final word on this. Yeah.
Yes. I mean, all these are rational arguments that I was giving to many people, and they told me it doesn't work. So I think the problem, to convince a mayor, the problem I think comes from a higher level, why the mayor has the possibility to have a grant for something where he should not have a grant. Because if he doesn't have the choice to have a grant, he will take a loan at 0% and he will see the advantages. So I think this is a kind of position we have to think ourselves. And we discussed earlier about the political steering and political will. If there is a political will to achieve something, the mayor should not have the choice. And it's a bit of part of our reflections for the future. For the moment, I would say try with a rational argument and maybe with figures. It always helps, no, to show how much you achieve and how much you will have at the budget and so on. And maybe for the future, you think about other solutions, more radical.
Thank you, Oana. I don't know if we can get a microphone back to Patricia, and maybe you can just say what you think in terms of the responses. What's your view from where you are?
Yes, these are very good advices, and we tried that, and we with all the rational thoughts, and when talking to local authorities, but and we try to avoid cannibalism. Try not to get the grant and the loan for the same issue, for the same subject. But still, we are the most hated people in our region, because with the low budgets, especially with the small local authorities, where they have many issues to deal with, and with small amounts of money in the budget, they will always choose grant. And we know it's a matter of a mentality change. But still, as a managing authority, we need to follow the N+3 rule and all these certification objectives, and it is not easy, because once we launch financial instruments for public services, there is a risk that nobody will take it. And we have to deal it to find the balance between attracting the loans and following the programming rules. So it sounds very easy what you say, and we know all the advice. But please feel free to visit our region, and we will organize a meeting with the local authorities.
We are coming.
We'll see how it works.
John, did you want to say something?
Yes, possibly we've been too rational and not cynical enough. What you might think about constructing is a loan product where the first repayment is the day after the next election.
Thank you. And let's end on a positive note. Congratulations on the very interesting financial instrument. It was very successful renewable energy that was presented today, so well done, Pomorski. Okay, do we have any more questions from the panel? Some very good questions. Yes, question from the front. Please, say your name and where you're from.
Okay, Minister of Industry and Trade, Czech Republic. I will be back to technical question, tough question. This is about guarantee instruments. I used to work for coordination authority when we didn't care about sort of financial advantage of guarantee instruments being passed on to final recipients. Now working for managing authority, we do care, or top management cares about how the guarantees are transferred to final recipients in terms of lower collateral requirements, lower interest rates. The issue is, to what extent is there any best practice, how we should pass on the financial benefit of guarantee instruments to final recipients? Is it something we should care about or should not care about? To what extent? Thank you. This is not in CPR, that's why I'm asking. Should we care, should we not care? Thank you.
Thank you, Jan. Very good question on the transfer of benefit on the guarantee instruments. Maybe Frank, I'll come to you first.
This is also a state aid question, right? And there are methodologies that have been established. Our sister organization, the EIF, does this all the time. But it's a bit of an art rather than a science, right? Because it's quite difficult to really quantify the benefits. But I think the wording is generally around, that you transfer at least substantial amount of the benefit or something like that. It doesn't have to be the exact amount. But essentially, you have to look at, the conditions under which the loan would be given without the guarantee. You need to understand how the bank how does it mark up its loans, what is the risk pricing, etc., and then you see how that compares to what they would be doing with the guarantee. And you need to do that in a fairly robust way because, of course, the banks will play with the numbers. You have to really know what the counterfactual is. What is the bank going to do without the guarantee? And there are ways of doing that. So it's not that difficult to do, I guess, is the short answer. But you need to do it, yeah. Because if it's not something in the CPR, it's certainly something in the state aid regulation that you need to sort out.
Oana?
Yes, it's a bit what Frank said. You should care a lot about because they changed the state aid rules for the minimis, and now you have a specific article which says if the aid is not transferred to final recipients, you have to fulfill this criteria. Yeah? But it is assumed that if the aid is transferred, you don't need to fulfill this criteria. But it may come that somebody one day will come to say, how do you transfer the aid? Yeah? So you need to have a calculation inside the bank how you transfer the aid. I mean, we are not bankers here, but if you want, we can try to see a bit with DigiComp some solutions. But I am afraid if we go into this direction, the banks which are doing it already, like EIF and so on, they may have problems because they will not fulfill this solution. Yeah? So best is to define your own methodology to show how you transfer the aid. The best possible. I mean, DigiComp says full transfer of aid and not approximate transfer of aid, but I think they are not really able to measure what is really the amount of aid. So whatever methodology may work. But on the other hand, from a policy perspective, we are giving public funds. If this public fund stops at the level of the bank, we are not achieving the purpose, yes? So for sure, we have to see a difference between a loan which is guaranteed under public funds and a loan which is not guaranteed under the public funds. And I think I'm not a banker, but it should not be extremely difficult to say we give a guarantee with no guarantee fee and maybe to reduce the interest rate and after you make a calculation. I mean, I'm exaggerating a bit because, of course, I'm not a banker, so it's easy for me to say. But you have to find a methodology for this for sure, and you have to keep it in your files for future audits.
Thank you, and thank you, Jan, for a question. Is there anything you want to add, Jan? Do you want to maybe share how you are approaching this question?
The thing is, we are looking for the way to how to approach it.
Yeah.
We are just negotiating it with the Czech Banking Association, so we are looking into what are the best practices. Mm-hmm. Yeah, what should we follow?
And inviting
them. If it should be quantified or not, if it should be qualitative, quantitative, so any hint. We are looking for any hint how to do it.
I think both, yeah. You have to find a way to explain both quantitative and qualitative. But we didn't work under FICOMPAS on this subject. We can reflect on it.
There is ways in which you can build that into your selection process, right? So you can ask the banks that are bidding for the guarantee to articulate how they're doing things before the guarantee, how they're doing things after the guarantee, and quantifying the benefit that they're assuming they're going to have. And you may simply say, we take the bank that gives us the biggest answer, because by definition you're picking the best in the market, right? Now you may say, well, we don't particularly want to pick that bank because there'll be other reasons why you may not want to pick that bank, but then you need to see what your selection criteria are and how you weight them.
If anybody in the room has best practice that they can share with Jan, you've got a day and a half to do so.
Did we have a question from somebody up there at the top? Yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you. You already elaborated on the question, so that was actually my kind request to have an official methodology on the subject, because it's a matter of endless discussions, and that could be actually the reason why not to do a financial instrument, because you will discuss for months and months and months, and it will not come to the end.
Thank you. Sorry, your name, sir, just for the...
Petr Votoupal, Czech Desk, European Commission.
Thank you. That's a good example of the theme, Ask Me Anything, so thank you for that. Would anybody else have any questions? Is there a question at the back? No? Okay, perhaps that's exhausted the audience. I'll maybe just have one, maybe last pre-cut question for the panel to ask before we close, which is maybe about the scope of Fee Compass support in the future. How do you see the support that we provide under Fee Compass maybe evolving to address these new challenges in the future? I'll start maybe with you, Frank, and we'll work across the table.
We talked about this before in recent events, about how the knowledge of the stakeholders using financial instruments has clearly evolved and is much more sophisticated these days, let's say, than it was when we started Fee Compass, put it that way. So clearly we need to move along with the times, as it were. And I think we have already done that to a certain extent. We're going much deeper into certain types of financial instruments, giving more explanations as to how they work, etc. The knowledge hubs are, I think, really good format for us to actually have, more in-depth conversations with the stakeholders on the issues. The scale-up initiative that we talked about a lot today is exactly going in that direction. The fact that we offer member state-specific support, Emily mentioned today, we're here to help anyone who wants to, take the plunge and do a state aid notification. We love that stuff. So we realize that we have to do more specific support, but at the same time, we recognize that this is an EU-funded program that has to operate, obviously, horizontally, help all stakeholders. So it's a bit of a fine balance in terms of how much can we go into specific member state or regional or financial instrument-specific topics versus everything else. But we have lots of examples of where there are common problems, and those are the ones that we're trying to address with the different formats we have.
Thank you, Frank. Emily.
Could I ask the audience what they think? A bit like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? Because I think Frank has covered pretty much all the things I was going to say. So, Jan's question was a really good one. That showed there is a specific need for some methodology, maybe some templates to help on that topic. But is there anything else like that that's very specific that you haven't heard in terms of the pipeline of support that we've already got that you think would help? Question back to you. Feel free to put your hand up.
Would anybody like to raise their hand and make a comment about what they would like to receive in the future? Thank you.
Thank you, Slovenian MA again, Teo. For me, especially at the phase of starting financial instruments, it would be very useful to have a list of all the instruments across EU and maybe contacts with and some basic characteristics to get in touch with the people who are in charge, for example, to help each other overcome the challenges. So maybe a request for FI Compass to do it in the future. Thank you.
Very interesting comment. We do actually have a list on our website, the country data pages. We do include all the financial instruments, including a link, which most of the time is accurate, although at the moment that's from the 14-20 period, because we rely on the data that is submitted to the Commission. But we should be updating that in the next 6 months or so. So thank you for that. It's a really good comment. Would anybody else have anything they'd like to add at the moment? No? That's great. Okay, thank you. Maybe Oana then. I'll turn to you. How would you like to see Fee Compass evolve in the future?
We are very lucky to have a very good working relation under Fee Compass, and it's flexible and simple, and we can adjust to the needs. So if you have needs which will come to your mind, don't hesitate to let us know. But we'll have now to start preparing the reflection for post-2027. It means that we'll maybe need to start see how we'll do financial instruments focused on results. We'll need to see a bit what are the market gaps in the member states for SMEs, for energy efficiency. The work of Fee Compass will also turn a bit towards the future. And for 14-20, it was already very valuable, so we need to start now to be able to put in place the new program. This would be a bit from my side, but of course we'll continue normal work. And the questions this afternoon were also a bit to see if you use Fee Compass and the products we are proposing. So I think we'll launch a survey also now next year. So we are quite flexible, and we want to reply really to your needs.
Thank you. And John?
Thank you, colleagues, for saying everything that can be said. So I'm not sure I have very much more to add. The one thing that I was reflecting on this afternoon, listening to the two green discussions, was that the way FI Compass is organised, it's all about you. It's not about us, it's all about you. You set our agenda. You tell us what you don't understand. You tell us what you can't make work. And we try to react. And for me, the big pleasure of coming to FI Campus is the big interaction between you as the practitioners, the people who have to sort out all the problems on the ground, and us, the so-called experts. And sometimes I don't feel like an expert at all. In fact, most days. You are the experts. You deliver the things on the ground. So we are here to help you. And in a sense, FI Campus is like the white tables we're sitting at now. It's for you to draw your pictures on. It's for you to write your questions on. And I think that is the big strength of FI Campus as a whole. It's about you. And we're here to help you.
Many thanks, John. We've run out of time. So thank you, everybody. Let me firstly thank the speakers, John, Oana, Emily and Frank, and let me thank everybody in the room as well for your contribution to what's been a very interesting exchange over the last hour or so. So thank you, everybody. I hope this has been an interesting experience for the listeners to the podcast too. We will be continuing to explore the potential of financial instruments over the next 2 days at FI Campus, and I hope we see you all at FI Campus events in the future. And finally, let me encourage everybody who's listening and in the room today to follow our Jam Sessions podcast series, which is available on your main podcasting platforms, so you can be notified of new episodes when they are released. Thank you, everybody, and goodbye.